Brian, it's you again. I can't hear you.
How about now?
Your mellifluous voice.
Greetings from Lake Tahoe, my friend.
Excellent, excellent. I'm sure things are a little bit more pastoral than they are here in South of Market Street.
Well, I last drove through that area a few weeks back, and I was caught in traffic. So that was an where's everybody going?
They're all trying to get out of San Francisco and cross the Bay Bridge to get to greener pastures, I think.
Yeah, I saw some signs that said this way to Austin.
Austin. Well, I'm not sure that Austin is a better choice these days. I mean, the pandemic is going to fry everyone's ass there.
Yeah. Well, as long as you could get barbecue with it, I'm sure they'll be happy. I'm just gobsmacked about the sudden shift in going 100% open and reducing the mask mandates so close to the finish line. But I guess that's for another conversation. I don't think the agita can handle that right now. My goodness. But John, I love the store that you've opened up since we've been in the pandemic.
This is my one foray into retail.
Hey, somebody's got to bring retail back, John. If anybody could do it, it's you. Well, welcome everybody. John and I are so excited that you spend a part of your week with us every week. We're Thursdays, 10:30 Pacific to 11:30 Pacific. Every Thursday here across multiple networks. You choose your network of choice, and we are broadcasting live. It is so exciting. We want to hear from you. So please share with us where you're tuning in from. Share with us a bit about your work and focus, and definitely share with us your questions and your comments and recommendations for the show. You are part of this community. You are why we do this. So let me officially welcome you to Intersections, a weekly conversational jam session that dives deep into the intersections among technology, innovation, culture, and ideas. We bring diverse personalities and worldviews together in service of greater understanding and also greater unlearning. And this is more important than ever before, John. I've been using your reemergence term that you shared with us last week because it's actually it's a profound milestone. It's a line in the sand that I feel like maybe we should write a joint piece on it together that really doesn't just explore the intersections of all of this great stuff. It also explores what can happen when these things intersect in order to unfold a brighter, better, more inclusive future than actually returning to normal. And with that, I'd like to set the stage for my co-host and colleague and friend, John Kao. John is, as you've seen over the last year of us doing this show, is someone who really can translate these incredibly complex ideas around economy, technology, but also psychology and then art in ways that are just so masterful. And it's probably why The Economist has called him Mr. Creativity. He is a thought leader, entrepreneur, and advisor. He's played a prominent role in the fields of innovation and business creativity for over 30 years. He's always on a virtual stage and eventually back on real stages. He is the chair of the Institute for Large Scale Innovation, and he's also a Tony-nominated producer of film and stage and wrote the best-selling book, Jamming the Art and Discipline of Business Creativity. John, welcome to Intersections.
Well, Brian, it's such a pleasure to share Thursday mornings with you. Brian Solis, my erstwhile partner here, is sort of the find who manifested in such a timely and wonderful way. Brian is a complementary and comparable and just astonishing thought leader in the, let's call it the digital domain, for want of a better umbrella. But, you know, Brian has been digital before digital was really that important, and has related it to marketing, has related it to the whole notion of innovation as an evolving field, has amassed an extraordinary array of relationships and social contacts, is a omnipresent person in print, online, and in keynote speeches, and in deep dives into what the future holds for all of us, and even has a day job, which is global evangelist for innovation at Salesforce. So Brian, couldn't be happier to be here with you.
Yeah, I enjoy these moments, and remind me to catch you up on some personal things after this. So exciting developments to share with you, John, first, and then everyone later. And so to all of those chiming in, sharing with us where you're from, thank you so much. We have people from South Africa, the Netherlands, London, Idaho Falls, all right, Manchester, and Donna, I love that, not Austin, fantastic. Well, with that, Donna, I'm just going to show that one more time. John, with that, why don't I turn it over to you and bring up our first guest?
Sure. Well, I'm really excited to introduce Shaun Stewart. Shaun is the CEO of New Lab, which is a quite extraordinary mutation in the whole notion of how you create the right kind of container for innovation at scale. I actually had the pleasure of getting a peek at New Lab early in the pandemic when the story broke about how New Lab had rapidly organized a global network of entrepreneurs and technologists and scientists to reinvent the ventilator, which at that time was experiencing shortages, and at warp speed really invented a solution that normally would have taken quite some time, if ever, to manifest itself, and had an opportunity, Shaun, to talk with Scott Cohen and interview him in some length. Shaun has a distinguished biography, a mile long. He's coming over to he'll tell us more about New Lab, so I'm not going to kind of steal any thunder from there. But he came over from having been the Chief Business Development Officer at Waymo, which was or is Alphabet's autonomous vehicle effort, and also has a rather distinguished career in the digital travel industry with assignments at Airbnb and Jetsetter and Expedia. So now he's bringing all of this formidable experience to bear on how you actually, at least as the way I parse it, institutionalize innovation at scale. So Shaun, welcome.
No, thanks for having me, John. I appreciate the kind introduction.
Well, we're privileged to have you. I mean, as you can tell, Brian and I are innovation junkies and advocates outstanding. So anyone who's reinvented the model of innovation is of great interest to us. Maybe for the benefit of our colleagues out in the digital community out there, it might be useful for you to just baseline us by telling us what New Lab is, and also what its innovation and venture studios model is. And then we can get into some more of the details about what's going on at New Lab.
Yeah, you bet. That sounds great. So I'm actually in New Lab right now. So we're sitting in Brooklyn in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is a 300-acre campus of private land. If you know New York, it's kind of nestled between Dumbo and Williamsburg, right opposite kind of 34th Street and Manhattan. And so let's start with the history of it. The Navy Yard itself was opened in 1803 and used its kind of largest employment volume was at the end of the Second World War. You had about 60,000 New Yorkers working here in the Navy Yard, building battleships through to ammunitions and medical equipment, one of the first Navy hospitals here on the grounds. And after the end of the Second World War, you had a period where the use case and how this was going to be kind of occupied and developed in the future was up for debate. And so the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation set out on a mission to make this an innovation hub, like a district of developing and piloting new technologies, advanced manufacturing. Really one of the earliest cases of like a committed initiative to create an innovation district. You see a lot of them now, like Mind outside of Milan and Station F outside of Paris. But this was one of the earlier ones that started maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And part of that process was the Bloomberg administration ran an RFP on this building that I'm in, 86,000 square feet, 90-foot ceilings. This is where the Navy built most of its major battleships for the First and Second World War. The USS Missouri came out of this building, the USS Arizona. We still have the gantries that move along the kind of middle of the corridor of the building to take large pieces of machinery into a dry dock. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. But the Bloomberg administration launched this RFP and said, if we gave you a 50 to 60-year lease on this space, what would you do that would be positive for New York? And so what we did was we responded. I always use a terrible analogy of like single people in New York, which is I know dozens of single people and they all tell me there's no other single people in New York. And all you kind of have to do is get them all into the same room. Pre-pandemic was a little bit easier. But we saw the same with entrepreneurs and people working in advanced technology to build companies, that they were all over the place. You had Strong Arm Technologies in Harlem building exoskeletons, and Boyce Industries in Long Island City and working on advanced manufacturing, and Seek was in New Jersey working on quantum computers. And what we felt was, why don't we build a home and a community where we can actually create a center of gravity that magnetizes them all and brings them all to one location? And not only that, but starts to attract talent from outside of New York and brings it to New York and retains it here in New York. So if you fast forward to today, we won that RFP. We spent $65 million that we raised in non-dilutive capital, converting this abandoned shipbuilding facility into what you see today. So added 4 levels, another 40,000 square feet of mezzanine space. We added $9 million worth of prototyping equipment, wood shops, metal shops, 3D printing labs, textiles, electric benches, everything you need to like tinker and develop that first generation product and pilot. And what started with just 100 people here building 30 companies in 4 years has grown to there's now 900 people here, 174 different startups. We've had 1.3 billion in liquidity events and exits, about 1.5 billion in capital raised for those companies. And over the course of 4 years, Brooklyn has grown from being, I think it was 8th in tech job growth 5 years ago, to now it's number 2 in the country, only behind San Francisco. And there was an Urban Futures report that cited 11% of that Brooklyn tech job growth came out of our building. And that's because we're the parents' basement, right? They build the company here when they're 10 and 20 people. But when you get to 50 and 60 and 100 employees, we're not the ideal place to scale your organization. They then move out, continue to grow in Brooklyn and in New York. And the last piece I'd add is more recently, we looked at how many of these companies relocated to come to New York to build at New Lab. And we're just about to hit 40% of the community came from outside of New York. And so it's been an incredible magnet to like bring more talent to New York, especially in frontier tech. So that was our starting point. That's our origination, which is build one of the leading and the most impressive communities of technologists, entrepreneurs, and innovators who can all collaborate and use this space as their home to build their businesses. Sure. So then we can jump into the innovation and venture studios, but that's kind of the starting point of how this business began.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. I mean, maybe the Innovation Ventures studio will tell us the part of the story, but what's the business model for New Lab? I mean, you raised non-dilutive capital and there were economic development sources of support, but now you have these 900 people and all of these ventures and so forth and so on. What is the business model for the entity itself? And is New Lab a nonprofit? Is it a for-profit? I mean, what's the platform?
Yeah, it's a for-profit organization. I think the interesting piece is we've had to develop, or not had to, but we've been beneficial in growing public-private relationships to grow this type of ecosystem. This benefits the cities, but it also partners with corporate infrastructure and with academic institutions as well. We do everything from transferring IP out of Columbia and Cornell Tech to help build new ventures from research. We partner with corporations and innovation studios that we'll talk about. We build companies from the ground up with VCs and sources of capital, which is our venture studio. And so really the business has just 3 product lines. You have the community, which are people who pay for offices and desks. Pre-pandemic, we had waiting lists for space here. We've been 96% occupied for 3 straight years. The pandemic pushed us back a notch. We finished August at about 65% occupancy. But by the end of the year, we're back to 95%. We've only got 1 office available in an 86,000 square foot building, which is interesting alone. Like at a time when New York office space is averaging kind of 18, 19% occupancy, we're just about to hit 100%. And it's because we built a home that means a lot to a very small, specific type of community. And so that's allowed us to be resilient throughout this period. But that first piece is the community, and they pay us to be here, but we provide the flexibility, the programming, the access to capital, everything they need to ensure they have a greater likelihood of success. And the 170 companies here, we've taken 2,000 applications and picked 170 so far. So you're like 7-8% acceptance rate. We get to be very choosy, and we focus on companies who are using really advanced bleeding edge technology in a way that we're excited to support, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
And so the second piece that led into the innovation studios, it often sounds nice to present it like, oh, we knew this from day one. Here was our 3 products, but it actually evolved over time, if we're being honest. And so in the early years, like a key part of my job was doing tours. We would have the mayor of Berlin one week and the CEO of Hershey's the next week, and a constant flow of people who saw New Lab as like a petting zoo for frontier tech. This place is like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. You can, modern meadows here growing leather from collagen, and launchers down the hall from them, 3D printing rocket engines. And then you've got Norbert Health building health monitors with computer vision. And it's just a great place to come remind yourself that entrepreneurs are working on some of the planet's harder problems, and there is reason for optimism. And those tours would inevitably end with the same question, which is, how can I get people like this, talent of this caliber, to work on my problems, my inefficiencies, my opportunities or business threats? And so when getting asked that enough, we eventually built the Innovation Studio framework, which was a 12-month partnership between us and a corporate or a government client. They fund the operational expense of the studio. And that studio goes through essentially 3 phases. Like, you've got a first phase, which is kind of similar to more traditional professional consulting. We look at their business, what the threats are, the opportunities, the weaknesses, and the strengths. And we start to uncover areas that we could potentially focus on where technology might be valuable and provide assistance. We align then on the tracks of focus. We're going to focus on digitizing your supply chain, or early detection of stink bugs in cargo containers, or figuring out how to avoid cyanide leaks and large explosions in mining operations in India. So we figure out, what do you want us to focus on? And then we go out and look at all the technology being developed around the world, in academia, in startups, research papers, IP that's been filed, patents that have been filed. We do open calls. Teams can apply to be part of the studios. And then you end up picking 6 or 7 teams that are going to be part of the studio, aligned with those tracks that we just talked about that you're focusing on. And so they then spend the second kind of trimester of the studio building and developing their technology, their prototype, their product that is going to tackle the problem the client identified. And then the final chapter is we literally pilot it. If you think you can identify that stink bug in a cargo container early, we're going to put your sensor in a cargo container and see if it does what it claimed to do. If you're going to detect an early cyanide leak in a mining operation, we're going to actually deploy your hardware and see if it does that as predicted. And so by the end of a 12-month cycle, you've typically got 50 to 60 people have developed new technology, piloted across 5 or 6 different pilots. And the client has been able to stress test a range of different potential solutions. But because you don't hire full-time the like 50 to 60 people who work in your studio, they own the IP. So they're working based on the fact that they own the technology they're building. But the client, for the cost of, I came from Google X, the average studio OpEx is like $1 million, $1.5 million for a 12-month cycle. That's what it costs for 2 to 3 engineers at a decent corporation here in the US, fully loaded. So for the cost of 2 to 3 full-time employees for a year, you can have 50 to 60 of some of the brightest technological minds working to build and develop and test pilots in your industry. So these rapid dialogue, so I should pause and see what questions you have.
No, absolutely. And I'm going to toss over to Brian in just a second, because I know he probably has about 2 hours worth of questions to add to my 4 hours of questions. But I do want to ask you one thing. So, if you look at how innovation works, there are some elements of the New Lab and the Venture Studio model that seem like canon now. I mean, you get a relatively open environment, you have diverse people, you have just the right amount of structure, you have an abundance of resources, you have a countercultural environment relative to let's say the corporate sponsors if they're coming in for the 12-month experience. What have you learned about doing innovation at scale that either might be a bit counterintuitive or that represents an advance on how innovation works. And part of the reason I'm asking this is because there's pending legislation called the Endless Frontiers Act that actually is about creating innovation hubs distributed in a national sense. So I'm sure they're going to be looking for models. And I'm always really nervous that people are going to be going to an old playbook and saying, oh, we need beanbag chairs and, you know, an open environment and
sleeping pods.
Right. And we'll have yoga classes and everything will be fine. When in fact, there's a much deeper DNA at work at New Lab, I believe, that I'm kind of encouraging you to try to extract some of that learning for us so we can be a little smarter.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. Certainly, what we looked at is you see a lot of successful internal R&D and innovation strategies that are celebrated, the Lab 126 at Amazon or the Google X equivalents, where internal innovation strategies require you to have incredible patience of funding. I worked on Project Chauffeur, developing the self-driving car at Alphabet, as you mentioned, and that was a decade-long project before seeing $1 of revenue produced by the technology. So the first piece is you got to have that patience if it's going to be internal R&D that you can invest year after year, but betting on Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 kind of outcomes. You then need to attract the best talent in the world. That if you're tackling these significant moonshots and challenges around innovation that require advanced tech, you have to bring those people full-time into your organization, which may be easy for some like a Google X, but for some of the clients we work with, we've developed solutions for the railroad industry. And the leading computer vision engineer in the country, she wasn't that interested in working for a railroad company full time. But when we told her she could work on a scope of work to develop a track inspection system for faults in track line, she would own the IP. She could pilot it with the railroad company themselves. And if it solved the problem, she gets to own it. That's attractive to her. But so the Google X model, the Lab 126, is you hire these people full time. You pay big comp. You get the best talent in the world to work on your problems. Then you build an environment they can fail without consequence. Some of these organizations bonus people for killing their own R&D efforts. You want to incentivize people that failure is not something to be worried about from a job stability perspective. And if you look at that model, there's only a few players that can build that internally and succeed. And even some of the biggest players haven't succeeded at those efforts. And so what we looked at was that, plus if you look 5-10 years ago, you guys know better than I, that startups used to be in this stealth mentality. You'd meet founders who say, I can't even tell you what I'm working on, or their LinkedIn profile said, I'm stealth, and I'll tell you when I'm ready. And what we found when looking at this was the opposite, which was for this community, no NDAs, no blacked out windows. Some of our biggest outcomes have been where multiple companies have teamed up to build a product. The jump bike that was developed here and sold to Uber for $260 million, it has solar arrays from Voltaic, a company out of Australia that does solar arrays for power generation in kind of Africa and East Asia. So you had multiple companies team up to develop products, and that's what we built this community around, is that if you can collaborate across entities, if you can publicly explain your problems to find solutions, you'll make greater progress. And on the corporate side, we said, don't think you're going to be able to hire the best talent in the world to work on your problems, especially if you're not a tech kind of brand that is going to attract that caliber of personnel. And instead, let's do it in the way we do it, which is let's go out and find these people, incentivize them that they own the IP and the technology they develop, team up with them to test and iterate on whatever they're developing to see if it works, build a larger audience, get government at the table, get academia at the table, get corporate at the table so that all perspectives are in the room while you're innovating, then actually pilot it and see what works. And if this is your studio, you own the first rights to license, acquire, invest in anything that's coming out of your studio. And what we've seen, over 4 years, we've yet to have a studio that hasn't renewed. Every year they finish in December, and every year they renew for another 12 months because the outcomes, the insights, even when the pilots fail, that's an incredible learning. And what happens more likely is you develop a solution that actually tackles the problem that you identified earlier on.
So it sounds like you've discovered a different level of innovation scale that is a threshold for effectiveness, but also effectiveness at scale, because it's no longer developing a widget, but solving a big problem, which is interesting. And I'd love to talk to you for hours, but Brian's been patiently containing his desire to get into the New Lab story as well. So I'm going to turn it over to him.
And also mastering all of these different buttons here as we talk. I will say, though, before we jump in, that I could not help but notice the phonograph on over your left shoulder or right shoulder, whatever way that is. And that was such a transformative album, August and everything thereafter.
Man.
I ended up doing
nice size.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my goodness. And I ended up doing a lot of work with Adam in New York as he was looking to get more involved on the rise of Web 2 and innovation. Just because one, he was there, and it was the rise of Web 2 in New York. It was an exciting time for tech, and super cool to see the convergence of multiple industries. And that's just such an amazing album. On that note, I've worked with corporate innovation studios. I've worked with innovation studios like Station F, for example. I was there for the grand opening in Singapore and Atlanta, all around the world. And it's always interesting to me that those who really understand innovation, like you, are those who've not been absolutely conditioned and maybe broken down by corporate, just the corporate experience, corporate culture. What is it that organizations, those that face incredible disruption, not just from the pandemic, but post-pandemic effects of digital-first transformation, isolation, the somatic markers of all of this change, what is it that larger organizations can do to partner more with organizations like New Lab, but also to bring a New Lab-like mentality inside, or take that corporate interest outside to be more successful and to accelerate sort of that change and innovation now and, basically for the future?
Yeah, I think at a minimum, we're saying that both an internal and an external strategy is needed, is that you're never going to be able to have all of the talent you need on your full-time team. No matter who you are, there's always going to be another level of insight or technology capability that you're going to want to bring into your innovation. And so we kind of advocate, even for the strongest internal strategies, that there needs to be an external strategy. And for us, if you look at, how many startups were founded last year, maybe 10,000, 15,000, those are all experiments. They're experimenting on a new product design, a new approach to a problem. And at a minimum, a large corporate entity, even if those startups fail, there's a lesson there. There's like an experience to garner from those that fail or succeed. And so we tried to build a structure that allows you to not only run your own in-house innovation that might be behind closed doors and we don't get to know anything about it, but to also build a mechanism to experiment with the outside community and what's happening outside of your building. I mean, some of the biggest technological breakthroughs have come out of academia, IP that's been coming out of Columbia University, or you just read that Oxford has now created more ventures in the last 2 years than the 200 years before that. If you're a corporate entity, how much access and insight do you have into what's going on in academia? Are you partnering with researchers to test early stage technology they're building? And so that's just one example of a whole bunch of experiments and innovation occurring that we think, whether it's through New Lab or anyone else, they should build a framework to access. So that could be an internal strategy where you have a team that looks at IP that's being developed around the world in early stage and see how it applies to your business, see which companies are raising money, what their product is and their strategy is, how it relates to your business. I mean, you're now at the point, for the first time ever, the S&P 500, the average age is less than 20 years. We're at 19 years now. Like 3 decades ago, it was the average company was 65 years old on the S&P 500. If you're not thinking about what's coming out of a garage right now that might impact your business, we see that as a problem. That Blockbuster might have recognized Netflix a little earlier if it had that type of an approach of looking what was happening in early stage ventures.
I got to jump in right there, because that's exactly what I want. What I want. John did an excellent job on helping us understand the dynamics of true innovation. Where I want to try to get is the laggard angle or the lens onto it, which is Blockbuster. That it's such a great story of how they did not acquire Netflix, but even if they did, I think they would have just crashed it. I don't think I don't think the culture of Blockbuster, C-suite, the boards, shareholders, I don't think anybody actually would have molded that into what Netflix is today. And what I'd love to hear from you, and you sparked my like inspiration level like huge earlier, is when you started reciting the list of everything that you're doing at New Lab. Everything from culture to experiment to incentivizing failure, which is just completely counterintuitive to most other traditional business models and thinkers. What's that playbook look like? Because even if executives of traditional organizations are out there looking at deal flow, they're out there looking at who's doing what, there's still that propensity to bring something like that in and just completely kill it just because of the culture of the organization, the construct of the organization. So what's like the few things that you could say at a high level to shake them and get their attention to say, you're doing it wrong and here's how to do it right. We've seen exponential change this year like we haven't seen in the last 10. Go.
Yeah. I mean, I think the point you're looking at is when you do find something successful, how do you both nurture and ensure it succeeds, positively impacts your business, but without falling back on your typical instinct, which is I'm going to buy you and make you a department in my company, that I'm going to absorb it, and that's how I'm going to get the most benefit from it. And we just announced one of our studios is based in Goa in India, working on sustainability and safety issues in iron ore mines. And we announced yesterday an investment by Vimson, who's our client on the studio, into CyanoGod, which is an early stage product for gold mining, for detecting exactly that, like early stage safety issues in mining. And so instead of acquiring and making that a product that they brought into just their own operation, they invested in it. They identified this team early. They piloted the technology in their business. They found it was successful and did exactly what they had hoped it would do. And so instead of acquiring and absorbing, they've invested and are now probably, I would think if they've got the right strategy, is going to help improve the product and then distribute it to their own competitors, which is, this should become a solution for the entire industry. And so with that approach, you're supporting the startup to grow and scale, but not requiring it to overnight accelerate to be at the same scale of what you are. You shouldn't expect them to go from 30 employees to survive in a 5,000 employee environment. That's not how you benefit and help them. You can benefit them with your insights, your network, your piloting opportunities, your access to technology or capital, but it doesn't have to look like it fits into your nice, clean org chart. And I'm one of the biggest victims of this. Like, I like to be able to explain organizational structure clearly, and a bunch of dotted lines drives me crazy. But I don't think when you find early stage ventures or entrepreneurs building something of value to the organization, that the best way to serve them and your corporation is to absorb it. I think you have to support it. And that's what we see more often out of these studios, is investment that leads to support, not acquisition that leads to like absorption.
Oh man. You know, I used to do work with Disney Institute and Zappos Insights to help businesses learn how to be like them. And I maybe there needs to be a New Lab University, because that's exceptional advice. I really admire what you're working on. Like John said, I could have hours of questions and conversation with you. But with that said, Shaun, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on just the amazing work that you're doing at New Lab, and just what an incredible story. So I hope we get to hear from you again.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thank you. Wow. Woo. Oh, where do you go from there? Oh man. Well, I am super excited to bring up our next guest. I know that Gregarious is in a meeting, so I'm going to have to learn how to operate all of these windows.
It's a new medium, folks.
Exactly. I have mastered them. Let me rephrase that. Our next guest is someone who, just to be honest, someone that I admired from afar, from a TV screen and from a seat in an arena when he was the saxophonist for Pink Floyd, and then got to meet him in real life during the rise of Web 2.0 and the early days of social media. As he was venturing in the intersections, great name for a show, by the way, between music and technology and culture. and also now experience. And so I'd like to bring up, well, let's see, I have to do this. So that means to add to stream. There we go. Scott Page.
You're getting it down, buddy. You're doing good.
Man, what, I'll just kind of say your a quick bio, but then you could share a little bit about what you're working on these days, which, musician, technologist, entrepreneur, saxophonist, guitarist for Pink Floyd, Supertramp, Toto, my goodness. And now you're the CEO of, do you say Think EXP or Think X, but it stands for experience?
Think Experience, but we use Think EXP as kind of the brand. Yes. Yeah. First, before we even start, I got to tell you, Brian, I am so excited to be on this show. I have been a fan of yours. I have learned so much from you through the years. And I'm serious. I'm not kidding. I mean, you were my go-to guy back in the early days of all this, content marketing and everything. So I feel I'm like a fanboy here. I get to be on your show today, and I'm actually very, very excited.
Oh, wow. All right. I'll take that. I will take that all day long, Mr. Page. So tell us about Think Experience.
Yeah, well, Think is it's a company that, I realized that you can't sell music anymore, right? So I've been in the music business. My background is music and technology. I'm on my 4th startup now. Was lucky I got to take one of them public and been through that process. And I realized that, you can't sell music anymore. So I started to think, well, what can you sell, right? And, it's the relationship and the lifestyle and really the experience. So I decided to launch Think Experience around the idea of it's an immersive entertainment company. So we had just finished doing 40 shows in a 360-degree immersive dome. We sold them all out. This was it seems like yesterday. A year's gone by, but the following year, I can't even believe a year's gone by, actually. So it's really about bringing new technologies and experiences together. And so Think Experience, and then inside Think Experience, there's a band called Think X, which is myself, Stephen Perkins from Jane's Addiction, Kenny Olson, Kid Rock's band, Nord Fisher from Fishbone. It's kind of a sort of pseudo all-star band, and we were doing a Think Floyd show in this dome. But so we were working on that, and so what had happened is now I'm getting ready to launch a thing called Livin.Live inside of Think. And Livin.Live is kind of taking a new business model, looking at what we can sell today and what's the new model, especially after all this COVID stuff, right? So I realized that, we're going to be able to have smaller live events. So those are going to happen. And then taking advantage of real-time two-way, the idea of streaming, but really the exciting part is the real-time two-way side of it, and how we can bring fan in stream and kind of bringing them into the experience. And then the third thing is delivery service. Since we have delivery service, even though I can't hand you something through the screen, I can actually ship something to you prior to our shows. So we're getting ready to launch Livin.Live. We have a box, kind of like Loot Crate, that gets sent out to everybody prior to the events. And these are live shows, and then it's kind of a real interactive experience. And we've actually been working on some patents on how to bring fans live into the actual shows from virtual place. So I'm really focused on this kind of the new business models. Because, as an entrepreneur, you might probably agree. I mean, right now, because of COVID and everything that's happened, I believe this is the greatest time I've ever seen as an entrepreneur for us, because there's so many new problems that need to be solved. And I'm very excited about what's going on right now.
Yeah, I can tell. And what you can transfer through the screen is that excitement and that energy. I'm all in, man. In fact, right before COVID, I was so close to going to one of the experiences, and I was so excited about it. And I think my plans changed, but you were already ahead of the curve in terms of creating sort of these experiences that didn't necessarily have to live in a physical space, that they could sort of transcend based on whatever dimension you wanted. Curious to see. There's a phrase is that disruption has a way of creating the best inventions, and coming into it, there's that idea of what the world needs, and then there's also those unmet needs, what the world doesn't know it needs. Once it has it, it can't live without it. Curious how COVID has reshaped sort of the trajectory of your ideas.
Well, this was last year was going to be our biggest year. We were growing like crazy. And, we, as players, we were doing Jazz Fest. We were going to Europe. We had all these things, and the thing just stopped, right? It was just like completely zero revenue. Everything ended. So, obviously my background has really been the intersection between technology and, experience, music, entertainment space. My background goes back to the fact when we started, seventh level. My biggest claim to fame that I'm most excited about is I designed and directed and produced with another guy the world's first interactive cartoon. So technology has been something that I've been involved with for a long time. So when I sat back, I got up one morning and I realized, well, it's over. This is a whole new thing. So what do we do now, right? What's the next? What's going to happen? So I just realized, like I said, that this live event thing is going to be different for a while. I don't think anything's going to change completely where we're going to have 10,000 people jammed into stadiums and stuff for a while, because I think it's changing. But at the same time, I realized that what's happened is that we've changed. This whole user behavior has completely changed now. I catch myself now on the phone, on watering my yard with 4 of my friends on FaceTime, right? And we're all hanging out. One of them's cooking and somebody else, and it's like we're hanging out. So I think this idea of everybody being brought together in this real-time world, and it's even getting more. So I just started seeing that, what are those real opportunities? What can we do now in the real time? Where is it really going? And then also just looking at the trends of, delivery businesses, because delivery is everywhere now. I mean, you can have anything delivered to your house. So that's like what I was speaking about with Livin' is we see the opportunities of really kind of marrying the ability to have a live performance. I can go to the performance. I can bring 4 of my friends virtually along with me to the performance, right? Or I can be at my house, invite my friends over, and now I can deliver an experience there, and then deliver things to to wherever it is. So we're building, our network is really building we're building the live technology stack, and then also the audience management layer that kind of goes together. It's one piece with the idea that I can, first, we've seen artists now that are killing it, making bundles of money doing these live streams, right? All of a sudden, and they're going, the artists, all my buddies are saying, well, geez, I didn't have to go on the road. I didn't have to hire my crew. I didn't have to do all of that stuff. So even thinking about that more. So the idea is we can actually have a main central location and now broadcast live experiences out to not only homes, but venues. So we're working on that concept to be able to do, like you could imagine doing, like a Chili Peppers show experience with pre-show wine tasting and things that we can actually do as an experience, bringing fans into the actual room. We just
where do I sign up for this? I want this now.
More of. We put 18 80-inch monitors around the band 10 feet away, brought our entire audience in. It was very rewarding because it was like everybody had a front row seat. Like, usually in a stadium, everybody's, as far in the back, you can't see anybody, you have your opinion. But here it was that. So we realized that there's a very nice experience in that way. And then we also, how we can bring those fans into the live experience. So we're launching this thing where we're going to be broadcasting out to some very cool venues where they can host an experience, kind of like, if you think about a Super Bowl party, or if you think of New Year's, rockin' New Year's Eve, you got New York, you got San Francisco. So we can start bringing all the people together and start bringing the fans into a kind of a whole new experience where they can actually be part of the experience, being brought up on the screens, and different ways that we can kind of interact and make them part of the whole experience.
Holy moly! Well, if you need 2 folks to document it, John and I would like to sign up to be part of this. This is incredible. Woo. I would love to do this. We're going to be doing this. I'll let you know the date because it's in a location. We found a place in Los Angeles, which is the most technically advanced venue I've ever seen in my life. Wow. It's incredible. And it's in a mansion up in near Mount Olympus in Los Angeles. And this guy has built full Atmos 3D game engines running the entire experiences. And it's outdoors, indoors, theater. I mean, it's the coolest place.
So I would love to have you come because it's going to be a really interesting, and the people that are coming to this thing is going to be incredible too. We've got an incredible thing.
I'm there,
right,
John. Hopefully you can make it. I have so many questions, John. I know you've got a million questions. If we have time, maybe I'll throw it out there later. But John, just to set the stage, is a fellow. I say a fellow innovation connoisseur, but he's actually a maestro and also just a genius pianist, jazz improvisationalist. This is how we kind of came up with the name for Intersections. So with that, John, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I've been listening with great interest, and my passion for music goes back to age 5, and the high point of my career was age 18 when I got to tour with Frank Zappa and the original Mothers of Invention.
Oh man, Bunk Gardner's a buddy, so yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I auditioned for Frank at the spring of my freshman year in college, and he invited me to come out to LA, and I basically shadowed him for the whole summer, and then went back to college and became a sophomore. So that
you actually play adult chords. Right, you play adult chords. So I'm a kid chord guy.
He's got the very interesting voicings for the suspensions, but that it's been all downhill from that point on. Wow. But I wanted to ask you. We have limited time, so I wanted to ask you a micro and a macro question. The micro question is a pretty simple one, which is how do you overcome the question of latency? Now we have jack trip, and musicians can play in synchrony, but within a 300-mile radius. When you start giving audience feedback, if the claps are off or the hoots are off, I can imagine that it might be an issue. It might not. Incidentally, I wrote an article on what happens when live becomes virtual that I'd love to send you, because a lot of things you've talked about in terms of trying to create a physical experience within the virtual portfolio are things that I talked about in that article. So one is the latency question, but the bigger one is you said something at the very beginning which chilled me, which is you can't sell music these days. And I'm in touch with a lot of young, talented musicians in their 20s and 30s. I'm very interested in their careers and their challenges in this era of history. And my question to you is, what happens to musicians? Because I think kind of in bad shape as just a social institution right now. And, your innovations are a really bright spot in an otherwise kind of dim or, kind of a down era of history for music. So what are some of your thoughts about how we can pump economic and social energy into the institution?
Well, first of all, I'll get back to the latency issue because that's a big one. That's the one you have to try to solve. We'll get to that. Yeah. Again, like I said, there's nowhere to sell music. You can't sell downloads. You can't sell CDs. You can't sell. So I try to teach artists that really they have to start thinking like an entrepreneur. You got to start thinking like a business person, right? And I actually teach a thing called SPACE, which stands for Story, Plan, Army, Conversion, Education. I can explain that a little bit more later, but I feel that the idea, I go back to from a business model. I really believe that finally Kevin Kelly's model for I would call the artist middle class is finally here with the 1,000 True Fan model, right? I believe that we now have, because of the 3 main drivers that happened on these darn things over here, is bandwidth, storage, and horsepower has changed, right? The bands have all hit. And so now we can do things totally different than we were able to do before because of this type of stuff. So I believe that now for artists, it's moving into, the smaller fan base, the 1,000 True Fans model. And if people that aren't familiar with that, the idea of a 1,000 True Fan is somebody that'll spend $100 a year on you. If I have 1,000 of those fans, there's my first $100,000 in revenue. So I teach everybody to go small now. It's not about broadcasting out to everybody. It's about identifying. I mean, we got growth hacking. We've got all kinds of ways that we can kind of find your audience right now. And it's really about building that super fan army. And I would contest, again, for a lot of what I'll call what I'll say the middle class of musician, I think is going to be one of the most exciting times ever because of this technology. You know, Twitter's a 24-hour cocktail party. I can go find my audience. I just got to be able to create value for them and figure out what they're going to want. So I believe that, the idea is that we need to think more about hives. If you want to survive, you need to build a hive. So I teach artists that it's really the start in this model is really to get to the first 100 to 200 fans that will pay on a repeatable basis model, some kind of build a repeatable model and then scale from there. And it doesn't really take that many people anymore. It's not millions, right? Because now we know our audience. There's all kinds of models that we can build into or what we can sell, experience, lifestyle, things like that. So I believe that it's really about going small, building that super fan base, and then growing your audience from there. And it's really about artists now need to get educated and really understand how all this stuff works. So I believe there's a great business model. I have a friend who she basically says that she's an artist, and she says about 125 of her fans basically cover her bills for the year. So it's not like these massive things. Now, obviously, if you grow and you can get the bigger audience, then you're going to basically exponential. But for my feeling is I want to get to that point where artists can make a good living with a few thousand fans, paying them on a regular basis, making a couple, 200-300 grand a year, and then kind of growing their business from there. So even though it seems a little grim and a little odd out there, I think it's actually more exciting because it's all about direct to consumer now. Right. That's the game. It's like, I don't need anybody else. I got my bank. And dude, with crypto coming on now, with the blockchain, you're seeing NFTs. I mean, this is an exciting time. And I'm going to tell the artists, if you don't figure this out now, it's going to be rough. You got a moment in history right now that is like nothing that I've seen in my lifetime to really grow and build a business, but you have to get up and you gotta become a business. First question I ask every artist is like, is this a business or a hobby? Okay. If it's a business, then how are you going to make money? Businesses make money. So what problem are you solving? And when I ask an artist that, they always, first thing they say is what problem? I sit around, play my guitar, smoke fatties all day, and I'm going to write a hit song. Well, that game is pretty rough. That's like a hits business. Right now, we have the opportunity to go to direct to the people, build that fan base, build those relationships, and I can generate the revenue. And, again, I believe, that we're about ready to see a major change on this planet over the next few years in so many ways. And I think, blockchain and crypto is finally getting to that point. We've hit that third band where now institutions are getting in and creating this whole new model. So I try to tell artists, man, you got to get up to speed. You need to understand that. I believe Bitcoin is the world's savings bank, savings account. And, I just think it's just incredible the amount of things that we can do now. The tools are cheap. We got direct access to the audience. We can grow our business. So I think that's really the model. And if you think about it, I've never seen so many great artists. YouTube has just brought incredible talent to the forefront now that we've never seen before. So I think from a music point of view, it's incredible, but they've got to figure out how to rise above the noise and create a story that makes them stand out and create great products. And you can build that base and create a really nice business now.
It's really interesting. So instead of thinking of yourself as being, is that me? Being stuck in the long tail.
On the reverb, John?
Oh, I didn't put anything. I just stepped on my effects pedal here, and I'm ready to stretch a little. Instead of feeling like you're being stuck in the long tail, you're saying build the hive, right? And scale. It's right sizing, right? Saying you have economic needs, you have expressive needs, and thinking like a business is really aligning all of these different elements so that there's a harmonious outcome.
Absolutely.
Which is really interesting. And it argues for the power of search, curation, and enabling that direct to consumer connection. Because I think, hearing it is one thing, doing it is another. And,
sure.
Some people getting up to 200 loyal customers is going to be a really big feat. But these days, we also have digital to be able to kind of make connections that never existed before. And it's interesting that you say also that you have to get over, being the lonely artist in a garret composing a tune. It really speaks to what is being an artist in the digital 21st century. And that's something we could spend hours talking about.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah.
But it's all the same when it comes down. It's creativity, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, I try to teach artists, to think about business and art. The business of the art of business is just like the art, and when you combine them together, that's the win, right? Because now I've got a successful product. And I'm doing it. So for me, I'm a big data. I'm into data. I test and validate everything before I go and do it. And I believe that we have those tools now that we've never had that, right? We never had access to data like we do now. Right. So it's, I think this is an incredible time for artists, but the main thing is they've got to get educated. They got to look at business at the same way as they look at their art and really combine them together if you want to win, right? That's my belief. But again, it's hard to find because there's so many artists that are just want to play their instruments and don't want to think about the business. They've been thinking about the labels and they've been thinking about all of that before, the old school. But if you've got it, look, it ain't easy having this much fun, but if you want to do it, you've got everything at your fingertips now to grow and build a business. And it's mind-boggling to me. I got a worldwide broadcast network in the palm of my hand. I'm more powerful than NBC was 10 years ago, right? I can own my audience because remember, whoever owns the audience wins. And I don't need a giant audience. I just need an engaged, loyal audience, and I just got to figure out what value proposition I can give them or what point of value that I can make happen.
Yeah, and to flip it around, I mean, those 200 people have a need that maybe didn't exist before either, because being one of a 10 million followers of, some big manufactured rock star is different from having an intimate connection with the artist, which now they've got the time to really sort of figure out what that connection is. So anyway, lots to unpack there.
And also that build on that, John, and it's essentially what creativity is all about, and that is finding a way to add value or light in the life of someone else that creates sort of the mutual exchange of whatever that currency is. And we see, for example, like this. This is going to change the game from here on forward, right? And this is going to force artists to think about that value and also that experience in a new way. And in fact, we should probably have you back to talk about the meaning of NFTs and art.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that as well.
Yeah, I'm in it right now. I'm focusing on that because, for me, I'm looking at, I've been just a little anecdote, I've been a collector for years, and through my tours, I shot 150 hours of Pink Floyd footage. I've tens of thousands of photographs. I have collected every piece of memory. I used to just shove it in boxes, right? And just do it. I had 2 storage bins filled with this. So now I'm bringing all this stuff out. And so I was very interested about how I could monetize that and things that I could do. And then this NFT thing comes up and I'm like, okay, this is going to be a very interesting time because again, it's crazy how this, how the currency is working today and what it is. Because I'm seeing regular guys posting stuff and they're getting, $1,000 to $1,500 for stuff that you can't even imagine. So I think there's a real model here for artists. They just have to, like I said, they have to get educated.
Yeah, 100%. Well, hey, Scott, what's the chance we might be able to hear you play a little something for us?
Oh my God. Okay, here we go. Okay.
And as Scott's getting ready for us, why don't we send the show out with Scott playing this week?
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good. You'll hear a little.
Here's what I'll do is, you got my pink mouthpiece, right? Nice. Let me see. Let me think. I forgot you were going to ask me that. I was just doing a session this morning. Let me see. Okay, so I'm going to play. Here's a song, one of the great saxophone torch songs of all time. So you got to see if you can figure this one out. Hope it sounds all right. I don't want to be too loud here. Let me shut this down a little bit. Let's see. Okay, let's see. There you go.
Oh.
Name that tune. Name that song. Anybody remember that? Theme to Mike Hammer. Nocturne.
Oh man, I just am. My breath is taken away. I got goosebumps.
Thank you.
Scott, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks very much for having me on your show.
Great.
That was awesome. And man, I didn't know we got musicians in your group. That's cool.
Definitely. Yeah.
Right on, brother.
Right.
Well, we will
All
reach
right.
out. We're going to bring you back for NFTs. We're going to do that pretty soon because we got to get that going. Thank you so much for being on with us. And on that note, we're going to bring it back here to say au revoir because we both have hard stops that we're 2 minutes late for. John, send us away.